I never thought I would attend my own son's wedding dressed as a cleaner. But that is exactly what I did. The grand ballroom was glowing with golden lights. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen stars. Everything smelled of fresh roses and expensive perfume. The kind of place I had never belonged to. At least that is what they wanted everyone to believe. I stood near the back entrance wearing a faded gray uniform and a worn-out scarf covering most of my face. My hands were rough from years of labor. My shoes were old and cracked. No one looked at me twice. To them I was invisible. Just another worker paid to keep the floors clean and the trash bins empty. But I was not just anyone. I was the mother of the groom. The woman who had raised him with her bare hands. The woman who had worked 3 jobs so he could go to school. The woman who had stayed up countless nights stitching clothes for other people's children so her son could wear something decent. The woman who had sold her only piece of jewelry to pay his college fees. And now I was here. Hidden. Erased. As if I had never existed. I watched from the shadows as guests poured into the hall. Women in silk saris and diamond necklaces. Men in tailored suits with gold watches. Everyone laughing. Everyone celebrating. The bride's family moved through the crowd like royalty. Her father shook hands with businessmen. Her mother smiled gracefully and accepted compliments on the decorations. And then I saw him. My son. He stood at the center of the stage in a cream-colored sherwani embroidered with gold thread. He looked handsome. Confident. Successful. Everything I had dreamed he would become. But when I looked into his eyes I saw something else. Guilt. He knew I was here. Somewhere. He had been told I would come. But he did not look for me. He did not ask where I was. He simply stood there and smiled for the photographers as if everything was perfect. My heart broke a little more with every passing second. A waiter passed by me carrying a tray of champagne glasses. He did not even glance in my direction. A group of women in designer saris walked past me laughing about the wedding expenses. One of them said the bride's family had spent over $2 million on this event. Another said it was worth it because the groom came from a respectable background now. Respectable background. I almost laughed. If only they knew. If only they knew that the so-called respectable groom had grown up in a one-room house with a leaking roof. That he had eaten plain rice and salt on days when I could not afford vegetables. That he had walked to school barefoot because we could not buy him shoes. But no one knew that story. Because it had been buried. Erased. Just like me. I moved slowly along the edges of the hall pretending to check the trash bins. My eyes never left my son. I wanted to walk up to him. I wanted to hold his face in my hands and ask him how he could do this. How he could stand there and pretend I did not exist. But I did not move. Because I knew the answer. He was ashamed of me. The bride entered the hall and the entire room fell silent. She looked like a dream. Her red lehenga sparkled under the lights. Her jewelry glittered like a sky full of stars. She walked slowly down the aisle with her head held high. Her mother walked beside her with tears of pride in her eyes. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I had imagined this moment so many times. I had imagined walking beside my son, holding his hand, blessing him, being part of his happiness. But instead I was here, holding a broom, hiding my face, watching from a distance like a stranger. The bride reached the stage and stood beside my son. They exchanged smiles. The priest began chanting mantras. Families gathered around them with flowers and blessings. And I stood in the corner. Alone. A young girl approached me. She was probably a relative of the bride. She looked at me with disgust and said something under her breath. I did not hear the words clearly but I understood the tone. She thought I was dirty. Unworthy. Beneath her. I lowered my eyes and moved away. My hands trembled as I gripped the broom tighter. I told myself not to cry. Not here. Not now. But the tears came anyway. I wiped them quickly and turned toward the back hall where the staff was gathering. I needed a moment. Just a moment to breathe. As I walked away I heard someone call out. Mother of the groom. Where is she? I froze. One of the guests was asking about me. An elderly man with a kind face. He was looking around confused. The bride's mother stepped forward smoothly and said something I will never forget. She could not make it. She is unwell. But she sends her blessings. A lie. A clean, polished, confident lie. And my son said nothing. He just stood there, silent, accepting it. That was the moment I realized the truth. He had agreed to this. He had allowed them to hide me. He had chosen them over me. I turned and walked into the back room. My vision blurred with tears. My chest felt heavy like someone had placed a stone over my heart. I sat down on a wooden stool in the corner and pressed my hands against my face. How did it come to this? How did my son, my boy, the child I had carried in my arms, the child I had sung to sleep, the child I had protected from the world, how did he become someone who could erase me? I thought back to the years I had spent raising him. The endless nights. The empty stomach. The borrowed money. The shame I had swallowed just to give him a better life. I remembered the day he got his first job. He had come home with his first salary and placed it in my hands. He had cried and said he would take care of me forever. He had promised I would never have to work again. But promises fade. People change. And love. Sometimes love is not enough. I sat there for what felt like hours. The sounds of celebration echoed faintly through the walls. Laughter. Music. Applause. And I sat alone in a cold back room dressed like a servant. Invisible. Forgotten. But I did not leave. Because despite everything, despite the pain, despite the betrayal, I still wanted to see him happy. Even if that happiness no longer included me. I was 5 years old when my father left. I do not remember much about him. Just a faint image of a tall man who smelled like tobacco and never smiled. He left one night without saying goodbye. My mother told me he had gone to find work in the city. But he never came back. We waited for years. My mother would stand by the window every evening watching the road. Hoping. Believing. But hope is a cruel thing when it has nowhere to go. Eventually we stopped waiting. My mother worked as a housemaid. She cleaned other people's homes. Washed their clothes. Cooked their meals. She worked from dawn until midnight just to keep us fed. I grew up watching her hands crack and bleed from washing floors. I grew up hearing her cry silently at night when she thought I was asleep. I grew up understanding that survival was the only thing that mattered. And then I became a mother myself. I was 19 when I got married. My husband was a kind man. Quiet. Hardworking. He drove a rickshaw and we lived in a small rented room near the market. It was not much, but it was ours. We were happy. For a little while. Then my son was born. I held him in my arms for the first time and I felt something I had never felt before. A love so strong it scared me. I looked at his tiny face and I made a promise. I will give you everything I never had. I will make sure you never feel the pain I felt. I will protect you from this world. And I kept that promise. My husband died when my son was 7 years old. A road accident. Sudden. Cruel. One moment he was there and the next he was gone. I was alone again. But this time I had a child to raise. I took on every job I could find. I stitched clothes. I cleaned houses. I worked in a small grocery store. I sold vegetables on the street. I did whatever it took. There were nights when I had no money for food. Nights when I fed my son and went to bed hungry. Nights when I cried so hard I thought my chest would break. But I never let him see. I smiled. I laughed. I told him stories. I made him believe that everything was fine. Because that is what mothers do. We carry the weight so our children can walk freely. As he grew older I realized he was smart. Really smart. His teachers praised him. They said he had potential. They said he could go far if he studied hard. So I pushed him. I made sure he never missed school. I bought him books even when I had to skip meals. I paid for his tuition with borrowed money. I worked double shifts so he could focus on his studies. And he did not disappoint me. He passed every exam with top marks. He got into a good college. He graduated with honors. He got a job at a big company in the city. I watched him rise. And I was so proud. For the first time in my life I felt like my suffering had meant something. He moved to the city. He rented a small apartment. He sent me money every month. He called me every week. He promised he would bring me to live with him once he settled down. I believed him. But then things started to change. His calls became shorter. His visits became rare. He started talking about his new friends. His new lifestyle. His new ambitions. And then he met her. The girl who would become his wife. She came from a wealthy family. Her father owned businesses. Her mother was a socialite. They lived in a big house with servants and cars and everything my son had never had. And they liked him. They saw potential in him. They saw someone who could fit into their world. But they did not see me. Or maybe they did. Maybe they saw me and decided I did not belong. The first time I met her family, I knew something was wrong. I had taken a bus to the city. I wore my best sari. The one I had saved for special occasions. It was old but clean. I had combed my hair neatly and tied it in a bun. I wanted to make a good impression. But the moment I entered their house, I felt it. The judgment. Her mother looked at me from head to toe. Her eyes lingered on my worn-out slippers. On my calloused hands. On my simple sari. She smiled politely, but her eyes were cold. We sat in their grand living room. The walls were covered with expensive paintings. The furniture looked like it belonged in a palace. I felt small. Out of place. Her father asked me questions. What do you do? Where do you live? How did you raise your son? I answered honestly. I told him about my struggles. My jobs. My sacrifices. I thought they would appreciate it. But instead they exchanged glances. The kind of glances that said we made a mistake. After that visit, my son started acting different. He stopped talking about me to his friends. He stopped inviting me to his office events. He made excuses whenever I wanted to visit. And then one day he sat me down and said something that shattered my heart. I think it is better if you stay in the village for now. Just until I settle things with her family. They are very particular about traditions and appearances. I do not want to create any misunderstandings. I stared at him. Misunderstandings. That was the word he used. As if my existence was a problem that needed to be managed. I asked him what he meant. He avoided my eyes. He said her family was used to a certain lifestyle. That they had expectations. That it would be easier if I stayed out of sight for a while. I felt something break inside me. But I did not argue. Because I loved him. And I thought that love was enough. So I went back to the village. I stayed quiet. I waited. And I hoped that one day he would realize what he was doing. But that day never came. Instead, I received a wedding invitation. A printed card with gold letters. My son was getting married. And I was invited. Not as his mother. But as a guest. A stranger. Someone who could attend if she wanted to, but whose presence was not required. I held that card in my hands and I cried. Because I realized that somewhere along the way I had lost my son. Not to death. Not to distance. But to shame. He was ashamed of me. Ashamed of where he came from. Ashamed of the woman who had given him everything. And that pain was worse than anything I had ever felt. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a phone call. It was not from my son. It was from her mother. She spoke in a calm, controlled voice. The kind of voice people use when they are used to giving orders. She said she wanted to talk to me about the wedding arrangements. I listened. She said the wedding was going to be a grand event. That there would be important guests. Business partners. Politicians. High society families. She said they wanted everything to be perfect. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. We think it would be best if you stayed in the background during the wedding. You understand. We do not want any unnecessary attention on family matters that might make people uncomfortable. I did not understand at first. I asked her what she meant. She hesitated for a moment. Then she said it clearly. Your appearance. Your background. It does not match the image we are trying to present. We have worked very hard to build this alliance. We cannot afford any embarrassment. Embarrassment. That was the word she used. I was an embarrassment. The mother who had raised her son with her own hands. The mother who had sacrificed her entire life. The mother who had given up everything so he could have a future. I was an embarrassment. I felt my hands shake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was the reason her future son-in-law was educated. That I was the reason he had a job. That I was the reason he was standing in front of her family as a suitable match. But I did not say anything. Because my voice was trapped in my throat. She continued talking. She said they would arrange for me to stay in a separate section during the wedding. That I could watch from a distance. That I would be taken care of, but I should not come forward. She said it was for my own comfort. But I knew the truth. It was for their comfort. They did not want their guests to see me. They did not want anyone to know that the groom came from poverty. They wanted to erase me. I asked her if my son knew about this. There was a long silence. Then she said yes. He agreed. Those 2 words destroyed me. He agreed. My son. My boy. The child I had carried in my womb. The child I had protected from the world. The child I had loved more than my own life. He agreed to hide me. I hung up the phone. I sat on the floor of my small house and I cried until I had no tears left. I thought about calling him. I thought about confronting him. But what would I say? How do you ask your child why he stopped loving you? How do you ask your child why you are not enough? I did not call him. Instead, I made a decision. I would go to the wedding. But I would not go as a guest. I would not sit quietly in a corner and pretend to be invisible. I would go on my own terms. I would see everything. I would hear everything. And I would decide what to do next. So I bought a second-hand cleaner's uniform from a woman in the village. I borrowed a scarf. I packed a small bag and I took the bus to the city. I told no one. Not my neighbors. Not my relatives. Not even my son. I arrived the day before the wedding and I found the event venue. It was a massive 5-star hotel with marble floors and glass walls. I walked to the service entrance and I told the supervisor I was looking for extra work. She looked at me and nodded. She said they needed more cleaners for the event. She handed me a uniform and told me to report early the next morning. I thanked her. And just like that I became invisible. The morning of the wedding I arrived before sunrise. The hotel was buzzing with activity. Workers were setting up decorations. Florists were arranging massive bouquets. Caterers were preparing food in the kitchens. I put on my uniform and tied the scarf around my head. I kept my face low. I moved quietly. No one recognized me. I worked alongside other cleaners. We swept the floors. We wiped the tables. We emptied the trash. I watched everything. I saw the bride's family arrive in luxury cars. I saw her mother inspecting every detail. I saw her father talking on the phone making last-minute arrangements. I saw my son arrive with his friends. He looked nervous. He kept checking his phone. He kept looking around. I wondered if he was looking for me. But I stayed hidden. As the morning passed, the hall started filling with guests. Women in expensive saris. Men in designer suits. Everyone smiling. Everyone congratulating each other. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. I heard conversations. One woman said the groom was very lucky to marry into such a prestigious family. Another woman said the bride's family had done thorough background checks to make sure the groom was worthy. Worthy. I almost laughed. If only they knew what worthy really meant. I walked past a group of the bride's relatives. They were standing near the entrance talking in low voices. One of them said, "I hope his side of the family does not embarrass us." Another one said, "I heard his mother is a simple village woman. Let us hope she does not show up dressed inappropriately." They laughed. I stopped walking. I stood a few feet away pretending to adjust a trash bin. My hands were shaking. One of the women noticed me. She looked at me with disgust and waved her hand. "Move along. You are blocking the way." I lowered my head and walked away. But their words stayed with me. Simple village woman. Dressed inappropriately. Embarrass us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk up to them and tell them who I was. But I did not. Because I was not ready yet. The wedding ceremony began in the afternoon. I stood near the back of the hall. I watched as the priest chanted mantras. I watched as my son and the bride exchanged garlands. I watched as families blessed them with flowers and gifts. I watched as my son smiled. But his smile did not reach his eyes. I knew him. I knew when he was truly happy. And this was not it. He was performing. Playing a role. Pretending. Just like I was. After the ceremony, guests moved to the dining area. Long tables were set with silver plates and crystal glasses. The food was elaborate. Expensive. I moved between the tables pretending to clean. I overheard more conversations. A man said the bride's family had invested heavily in this alliance. A woman said the groom came from humble beginnings, but he had made something of himself. Humble beginnings. That was a polite way of saying poor. I kept walking. I reached a corner where the bride was standing with her mother and a few close relatives. They were talking in low voices. I moved closer, pretending to wipe a nearby table. The bride's mother said, "I am glad we managed to keep his mother out of sight." Can you imagine if she had walked in wearing those old clothes? The guests would have talked for weeks. The bride laughed softly. She said, "I know. I told him from the beginning. I do not mind his background, but I do not want it displayed in front of everyone. Image matters." Her mother nodded. She said, "You did the right thing. Once you are married, you can manage the situation. Maybe send her some money every month. Keep her comfortable. But keep her away." The bride agreed. She said, "Exactly. Out of sight. Out of mind." They laughed again. I stood frozen. Out of sight. Out of mind. That was what I had become. A problem to be managed. A burden to be kept hidden. An inconvenience. I felt something rise inside me. Not sadness. Not pain. Anger. Pure. Cold. Burning anger. I gripped the cleaning cloth in my hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to walk up to them. I wanted to rip off my scarf and show them my face. I wanted to scream. But I did not. Not yet. Because I needed the right moment. I needed the moment when everyone would see. When everyone would hear. When everyone would know the truth. And that moment was coming. I could feel it. The evening celebration was in full swing. Music played loudly. Guests danced. Laughter filled the air. I moved through the crowd silently. My anger had turned into something colder. Something sharper. Determination. I was no longer the grieving mother standing in the shadows. I was a woman who had been pushed too far. And I was done being invisible. I walked toward the back hallway where the staff was taking a break. I needed a moment to think. To plan. But as I turned the corner, I heard raised voices. I stopped. A small group of the bride's relatives were gathered near the storage room. They were surrounding someone. I moved closer. And then I saw her. A young girl. Probably one of the junior staff members. She looked terrified. One of the bride's uncles was shouting at her. "Where is it? What did you do with it?" The girl was crying. "I did not take anything. I swear. I did not." Another relative stepped forward. A woman dripping in gold jewelry. She said, "We know someone from the staff took it. A family heirloom. A diamond necklace. It was on the dressing table and now it is gone." The girl shook her head frantically. "I did not go near the dressing room. Please. I did not take anything." But they did not listen. The uncle grabbed her arm. "We are calling security. They will search all of you. And whoever took it will be sent to jail." The girl sobbed. I felt my chest tighten. I knew what was happening. They were looking for someone to blame. And they had found an easy target. A poor, powerless, invisible worker. Just like me. I stepped forward. My voice was calm. Steady. "Excuse me." They all turned to look at me. The uncle frowned. "What do you want?" I said, "Let her go. She did not take anything." He laughed. "And how would you know?" I said, "Because I have been watching. I have been here all day. I saw everything." The woman in gold jewelry stepped forward. She looked me up and down with disgust. "You are just a cleaner. Stay out of this." I smiled. A cold, bitter smile. I said, "You are right. I am just a cleaner. But I am also someone who knows the truth." The uncle narrowed his eyes. "What truth?" I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment. I reached up and slowly pulled off my scarf. My face was revealed. My hair. My eyes. My identity. The group fell silent. The bride's mother was standing nearby. She looked at me and her face went pale. The uncle stared. "Who are you?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I am the mother of the groom." The words echoed in the hallway. No one moved. No one spoke. I continued. "I am the woman you have been hiding. The woman you told to stay out of sight. The woman you called an embarrassment." The bride's mother stepped forward. Her voice was shaking. "What are you doing here?" I said I am attending my son's wedding. Just like you invited me to. Or did you forget? She opened her mouth but no words came out. I turned to the young girl who was still crying. I said you can go. They will not trouble you anymore. She looked at me with wide eyes and then quickly ran away. I turned back to the group. I said now. About that missing necklace. Maybe instead of blaming innocent workers you should check your own pockets. Or maybe it was never missing at all. Maybe this was just an excuse to feel powerful. The uncle's face turned red. How dare you? I said how dare I? How dare I speak the truth? How dare I stand up for someone who cannot defend herself? How dare I exist? The woman in gold jewelry raised her hand as if to slap me. But I did not flinch. I looked at her calmly. I said go ahead. Hit me. Show everyone what kind of people you really are. She hesitated. Her hand trembled. Then she lowered it. I said that is what I thought. I walked past them. My heart was pounding. But I did not look back. I walked into the main hall. The music was still playing. The guests were still dancing. But I was no longer hiding. I walked straight toward the stage where my son was standing with the bride. People started noticing me. Whispers spread through the crowd. Who is that? Why is she dressed like that? Is she a worker? I kept walking. My son saw me. His face went white. He stepped forward. What are you doing? I stopped in front of him. I looked into his eyes. The same eyes I had looked into when he was a baby. The same eyes that had once looked at me with love. Now they were filled with fear. I said I am doing what I should have done a long time ago. I turned to face the crowd. Hundreds of people stared at me. I took a deep breath. And I began to speak. My voice was calm. But it carried through the hall. I said I am the mother of the groom. Some people gasped. Others looked confused. I continued. I know many of you do not know who I am. That is because I was told to stay hidden. I was told that my presence would embarrass this family. That my appearance would ruin this beautiful wedding. The bride's mother tried to step forward but someone held her back. I said I wore this uniform because I wanted to see the truth. I wanted to see how people really felt. And I did. I looked at my son. I said I raised you alone. Your father died when you were 7. I worked 3 jobs to keep you fed. I stitched clothes late into the night so you could go to school. I sold my wedding jewelry to pay your college fees. My voice cracked but I pushed forward. I said I did not do it for recognition. I did it because I loved you. Because you were my world. My only hope. Tears filled my eyes but I did not wipe them away. I said and when you succeeded I was so proud. I thought all my suffering had been worth it. I thought you would remember where you came from. I thought you would honor the sacrifices I made. I paused. The hall was completely silent. I said but instead you hid me. You let them convince you that I was not good enough. That I was an embarrassment. That I should stay out of sight. My son's face was covered in tears. He whispered, "Ma, please." I said no. You need to hear this. Everyone needs to hear this. I turned to the bride's family. I said you judged me because I am poor. Because I do not wear expensive clothes. Because I do not speak like you. Because I do not belong to your world. The bride's mother looked away. I said but let me tell you something. I may not have money. I may not have status. But I have something you will never have. I paused. I said dignity. The word hung in the air. I said I have spent my entire life working with my hands. I have cleaned floors. I have washed clothes. I have done every job you people look down on. But I did it with honor. I did it to give my son a future. I looked around the room. I said and you. All of you standing here in your expensive clothes and jewelry. How many of you have sacrificed anything real? How many of you have gone hungry so someone else could eat? How many of you have given up your dreams so someone else could succeed? No one answered. I said that is what I thought. I turned back to my son. I said I do not blame you for wanting a better life. I do not blame you for marrying into this family. But I do blame you for forgetting who you are. For forgetting where you came from. For being ashamed of the woman who gave you everything. He fell to his knees. He was sobbing. He said, "Ma, I am sorry. I am so sorry." I looked down at him. I said sorry is just a word. It does not erase what you did. It does not erase the pain you caused. He reached for my hand. He said, please. Forgive me. I made a mistake. I let them influence me. I was weak. I was scared. But I love you. I have always loved you. I pulled my hand away. I said love is not enough when it comes with shame. The bride stepped forward. Her face was pale. She said, I am sorry too. I did not understand. I was wrong. I looked at her. I said, you were not wrong. You were taught to think this way. You were raised to believe that people like me do not matter. That we are beneath you. She shook her head. She said, no. That is not true. I said, then prove it. Prove that you understand. Prove that you respect the people who work for you. The people who serve you. The people you ignore every single day. She did not know what to say. I turned back to the crowd. I said, I came here today to see my son get married. But I also came here to remind all of you of something important. I paused. I said, money does not make you better than anyone else. Status does not make you superior. What makes you human is how you treat people who have less than you. How you honor those who sacrificed for you. How you remember where you came from. I looked at my son one last time. I said, I forgive you. But I will never forget. And with that I turned and started walking toward the exit. The crowd parted. No one stopped me. No one spoke. I walked out of the hall with my head held high. For the first time in months I felt free. I did not go far. I sat on a bench outside the hotel. The cool night air touched my face. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. It was my son. He stood a few feet away. His face was red from crying. His hands were shaking. He said, Ma, please do not leave like this. I said, I am not leaving. I am just tired. He sat down beside me. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then he said, I do not know how to fix this. I said, you cannot fix it. Not today. Maybe not ever. But you can learn from it. He nodded slowly. He said, I was so afraid of losing them. Of losing this life. That I forgot what really mattered. I said, fear makes us do terrible things. But it does not excuse them. He wiped his eyes. He said, what do I do now? I said, you go back inside. You finish your wedding. You start your new life. He looked at me. He said, and you? I said, I will go home. Back to my village. Back to my life. He said, no. Please. Stay. Be part of this. I will tell everyone. I will make sure they respect you. I smiled sadly. I said, respect cannot be forced. It has to be earned. And right now I do not think they are ready to give it. And I am too tired to fight for it. He said, I do not want to lose you. I said, you will not lose me. I am your mother. I will always be your mother. But things have changed. And we both need time to heal. He reached for my hand. This time I let him hold it. He said, I love you, Ma. I know I did not show it. But I do. I always have. I said, I know. And I love you too. But love is not enough when it is built on shame. He nodded. He said, I will do better. I promise. I said, then show me. Not with words. With actions. He said, I will. We sat there for a while longer. Then I stood up. I said, go back inside. Your bride is waiting. Your guests are waiting. He said, will you come back in? I shook my head. I said, no. This is your moment. Not mine. He said, I want you there. I said, I know. But I need to leave. For my own peace. He hugged me tightly. He whispered, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I said, I know. I pulled away gently. I said, be happy. Be kind. And never forget where you came from. He nodded. I turned and walked away. This time I did not look back. I took the late-night bus back to my village. The roads were empty. The sky was dark. I sat by the window and watched the city lights fade into the distance. I thought about everything that had happened. The pain. The betrayal. The anger. The confrontation. And I realized something. I had spent so many years making myself small. Shrinking. Hiding. Apologizing for existing. But today I had stood tall. I had spoken my truth. I had refused to be erased. And that felt powerful. I did not know what would happen next. I did not know if my son would keep his promise. I did not know if the bride's family would change. But I knew one thing. I had reclaimed my dignity. And no one could take that away from me. When I reached my village, it was almost dawn. I walked slowly to my small house. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The old furniture. The faded walls. The simple kitchen. But it felt different now. It felt like home. Not because it was comfortable, but because it was mine. I sat down on my bed and closed my eyes. I thought about my son's face when he saw me. I thought about the moment I pulled off my scarf. I thought about the silence in that hall. And I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time I felt like myself again. Not someone's mother. Not someone's burden. Just me. A woman who had survived. A woman who had fought. A woman who had refused to disappear. Days passed. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. I went back to my work. I stitched clothes. I tended to my small garden. I talked to my neighbors. But something had changed inside me. I no longer felt small. I no longer felt invisible. I had learned something important. That my worth was not defined by how others saw me. It was defined by how I saw myself. And I saw a woman who had given everything. A woman who had loved fiercely. A woman who had stood up when it mattered most. One afternoon I received a phone call. It was my son. He said, "Ma, I need to talk to you." I said, "I am listening." He said, "I told everyone the truth. About you. About our past. About everything." I said, "And?" He said, "Some people were shocked. Some people judged. But I did not care. I told them that I am proud of where I come from. That I am proud of you." I felt a warmth spread through my chest. I said, "How did your wife react?" He said she was quiet at first. But then she said she wanted to meet you properly. She said she wanted to apologize. Face to face. I said she does not need to apologize. He said yes she does. And so do I. Every single day. I said you are learning. That is all I can ask for. He said, "Will you come visit us?" I hesitated. He said, "Please, Ma. Not for a celebration. Just for tea. Just to talk." I thought about it. I said, "I will think about it." He said, "That is enough for now." We talked for a little while longer. And when we hung up I felt something I had not felt in months. Hope. Not the desperate kind. But the quiet kind. The kind that grows slowly. The kind that does not demand anything. The kind that simply exists. A few weeks later I took the bus back to the city. My son picked me up from the station. He looked different. Calmer. More grounded. He hugged me tightly. He said, "Thank you for coming." I said, "I am your mother. I will always come when you need me." We drove to his apartment. It was small but neat. His wife was waiting at the door. She looked nervous. When she saw me she folded her hands and bowed slightly. She said, "I am sorry for everything. I was wrong. I did not see your value. I did not understand." I said, "You were young. You did not know." She said, "That is no excuse." I said, "No. But it is a starting point." She invited me inside. We sat together and drank tea. It was awkward at first. But slowly the conversation began to flow. She asked me about my life. I told her. Not the sanitized version. The real one. She listened. And for the first time I saw something in her eyes. Respect. Not pity. Not guilt. Respect. My son sat beside me holding my hand. He said, "Ma, I want you to know something." I said, "What?" He said, "I am going to make sure you never have to work again. I am going to take care of you. The way you took care of me." I said, "I do not need luxury. I just need dignity." He said, "You will have both." I smiled. I said, "Then I will accept." We spent the rest of the day together. Talking. Laughing. Healing. It was not perfect. But it was a beginning. Months passed. My son kept his word. He sent me money every month. He called me every week. He visited me whenever he could. And slowly, very slowly, the wounds began to heal. His wife also changed. She started treating me with genuine warmth. She asked for my advice. She listened to my stories. She even visited me in the village once. She looked around my small house and said, I understand now why my husband is the way he is. He learned strength from you. I said, strength is not something you are born with. It is something you build. One painful day at a time. She nodded. She said, I want to learn that kind of strength. I said, then stay humble. Stay kind. And never forget that every person you meet has a story you know nothing about. She said, I will remember that. 1 year after the wedding, my son called me. He said, Ma, we have news. I said, what is it? He said, we are going to have a baby. I felt tears spring to my eyes. I said, that is wonderful. He said, and we want you to be there. Not hidden. Not in the background. We want you to be part of everything. I said, I will be there. He said, the baby will know your story. The baby will know what you did for me. The baby will grow up respecting you. I said, that is all I ever wanted. When my grandson was born, I held him in my arms. He was tiny. Perfect. Beautiful. I looked into his eyes and I made a promise. I will make sure you grow up knowing the value of hard work. I will make sure you grow up respecting everyone, rich or poor. I will make sure you grow up understanding that love is not about what you have. It is about what you give. My son stood beside me. He said, thank you, Ma, for everything. I said, you do not need to thank me. Just be a good father. That is all the thanks I need. He said, I will. And I believed him. Looking back now, I realize something. The pain I went through was not meaningless. It taught me something important. That silence is not strength. That hiding is not love. That sacrifice does not mean erasing yourself. I learned that I had value. Not because of what I did for others, but because I existed. Because I survived. Because I fought. I also learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means letting go of the anger so it does not consume you. It means moving forward without bitterness. It means choosing peace over revenge. And I chose peace. Not because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to let go. Today I live quietly in my village. I still stitch clothes. I still tend to my garden. But I also visit my son. I hold my grandson. I laugh with my daughter-in-law. And I am happy. Not because everything is perfect, but because I am no longer invisible. I am seen. I am heard. I am respected. And that is all I ever wanted. If there is one thing I want people to understand from my story, it is this. Never let anyone make you feel small. Never let anyone erase your worth. Never let anyone tell you that your sacrifices do not matter. Because they do. Every single one of them. You matter. Your story matters. Your pain matters. And your dignity is not something anyone can take from you. It is something you carry within yourself. Always. I am a mother. I am a survivor. I am a woman who refused to disappear. And I am proud of that. This is my story. And it is finally mine to tell.